Hello there, everyone, and today we're going to take a look at Has-Been Heroes, something that I've been playing quite a bit for the past couple of days to try and get to a point where I'm actually comfortable with filming it, because this game is hard as shit. It takes a lot of getting used to because the mechanics are a bit strange, and well, the tutorial isn't inadequate, it just has some mechanics that aren't either not well explained or are just... they have a lot of nuances to them that you have to sort of learn on your own. First of all, look at this unlock screen. Good God. Look at all these spells. There are like over 300 of them. And this is kind of one of the main draws of the game. Every time you play, and inevitably die, and you will unlock things. And there are things to unlock. We'll just say that. A lot of them. A ridiculous number of them. These are the spells. You've also got items, of course. Enemies. You unlock more enemies to fight. Crossroads, which I will explain once we get to the game. Regions, which are, of course, where you go. And even endings. And, of course, the heroes themselves. Now, I just unlocked this hero, who I haven't used yet. But, I mean, it's a wrestler. So, of course I'm going to try him out. Although, you know, replacing the knight, who is one of my favorite heroes that I've been using so far, very effective, is a little bit of a tentative decision for me, but, I mean, come on. Wrestler, look at him. So, let's get into it and show you how it goes. There are a ton of heroes to unlock as well, by the way. And the differences between each hero, I'll explain once we get in. So, new game! You will roll up your first area. In this case, it's going to be the Dark Forest. And here we are. Dark Forest, indeed. He is quite the portly wrestler. Oh, he has 4 stamina. Wow. Now, okay, you might be a little confused. So, every character starts with a spell. Spells are very important. They start with a piece of equipment. In this case, since he's a wrestler, it is his fist, which does a crap ton of damage, by the way. Recharges very fast. Casting any spell instantly recharges your melee attack. Ooh, that's new. Okay, very useful. So he's going to be just a destroyer. And all of this, which I'll explain once it becomes relevant in a minute. And every character also has a set amount of health. And these stamina pips, I guess you could call them. And essentially, they protect your health gauge. You can take that many hits before you will actually start taking damage to your health gauge. And enemies have the same thing, and this is extremely important to the combat system. You also start with a candle, which you use for backtracking, 300 gold, which you use for buying things, amazing I know, and nothing else. So, a bit like Binding of Isaac, every level has 2 variants. So the first level can either be the Dark Forest or the Snowy Forest. The second level can either be the Volcanic Plateau or the Desolation, and so on and so forth. And every one of them has its own theme, its own enemy types, and its own boss pool. There are multiple bosses, again, like Isaac and other Rogue-lite style games, of which this is, of course, one, to encounter randomly as you go across them. And each level is also laid out randomly. You can see here that there are a bunch of question marks, because I don't know what any of this is until I actually get adjacent to it. Once you're adjacent to something, you can see... ooh, I got lucky. These big question marks are the crossroads that I was talking about. And in this case, I've come across a rare merchant, which means he has a good chance of actually holding a rare item for me to buy. In this case, it actually turns out that it's a 1-star, which is a common item, so I got a little less lucky than I thought. But still pretty good. So that's something I've actually picked up before. 10% faster melee recharge, 10% spell damage. So that is really good. In fact, I might actually give that to the wrestler, which seems weird to give something like that to, like, the tank, but in this case it seems useful. And here's something weird about the game mechanics. You have lanes. This little yellow circle here allows you to move your characters around. And if I want to give this to a specific character, as soon as you click on it, the character in that lane is going to grab it, and you cannot move spells or items around in slots once a character has grabbed them. So I want to make sure that the character in the top lane is the character that I want to give this item to as soon as I buy it. So, wrestler, have that. Also, whenever you get an item for a character, it will give them 50 extra max health, which is very useful. So there we go. We're moving on, moving on, moving on. And, ooh, a water spell vendor, which is nice because my bard here likes water spells. And I have just enough gold to buy something from, because it usually takes 200. Yep, alright, we're going to move the bard. Our working waters. Move him into the middle, buy a water spell, and this is where this is relevant. So everyone can hold 5 spells. What is that? I don't know, because I've never gotten it before. And these are bonuses. Ooh. Summon Water Bomb. Summons running Water Bomb that explodes when killed. Explosion deals 220, 240 damage and soaks all nearby enemies. That's kind of amazing, but it does have a minute-long cooldown, which is a lot in this game. It's longer than it sounds, actually. So this is a strange system. These bonuses only apply to the spell in that slot. So in this case, spells forming puddles will create an additional puddle, which means that it should work with this Water Bomb, I would think. But that doesn't mean that once I put a spell in this slot that every other spell that creates puddles will also do it. It only works for the spell in that slot. So using a buff on a hero buffs your whole party. That means I would want to make sure to put a buffing spell in this slot to make it work. Otherwise it would have no effect. So that can be a bit of a problem, and I'll explain why in a moment, but I want to show you the battle system first, because it's actually really cool. Okay, pause. Holy crap. Here's the battle system. So, it constantly goes in slow motion, but you can also pause it. And every enemy, as you can see, also has these stamina bits like you. There's also an enemy that I need to destroy from far away, because he can blow up and freeze us. So, there we go. That will freeze them. You want to match your number of attacks. As you can see, he'll do 1 attack, he'll do 2, and she will do 3. To the number of stamina pips that the enemies have. And there's a good reason for that. So, I can't really do that perfectly right now, so what I'll do, since he has none, I'll just, there we go, and I'll move him down. He does 1 attack, so I can do this, boom, it will stun an enemy if you hit the exact number of pips that they have. Move him because he has 2, stunned, and then that means you can now actually go through their stamina to their health and start doing damage to them. If you hit them now, gotta wait for my melee to recharge here. There we go. Like that. As you can see, -1 max stamina. If you're able to stun them and then hit them, it will remove 1 stamina from their count permanently. Hit them with the guitar, loot thing, and that's important, because some enemies can actually have a lot of stamina and can make it quite difficult for you to do much damage to them. So I can stun this guy, and hit him again. Boom, there we go. Big hit. -1 max stamina, now he has 3, so it's easier to stun for the next time. And as you can see, if you do it enough, they actually lose their stamina completely, and you can just wail on them. Now, if you do this, if you attack them in an improper amount through their stamina, as you can see there, it does 25% less damage than it normally would if you actually perfectly calculate the amount of attacks you would need to stun them first. So you will be doing significantly less damage if you just smack them around and don't count the number of hits you need properly, and it also will not take away max stamina from them. So they'll land and regenerate their stamina back to full. Let's make a water bomb in this middle lane. Oh my god, it's cute! Wait for it. Wait for it. Oh, do I have to actually hit it myself? Pentakill. That's amazing. Okay. That's a really cool spell. I like that. Alright, stun him. Down here and smack him around. So as you can see, the combat system is actually really interesting. It's got this really neat kind of, I guess, sort of cinematic feel to it, because of how everything is sort of always going in slow motion all the time. Which, I mean, what does this do again? 40 lightning damage and remove 20 stamina? Good lord. That'll be useful against bosses. Yeah. And, because of how everything's constantly going in slow motion, it does have this sort of cinematic feel, as if your armies are constantly marching towards each other in a particularly satisfying way. Oh, I mistimed that pretty bad. Let's do some water damage to him. I'm just gonna have to hit him anyway, even though it's not the right amount of hits. There's a lot of strategy involved in this, and this is where some of the mechanics aren't necessarily explained as good as they could be. So, wow. There's a lot to go through, actually. For instance, backstabbing. You can actually backstab enemies, which isn't talked about in the game. Essentially, if you do this... show you. I do this, I then swap out someone from this lane, which will cause him to end up in front of these enemies. As soon as I unpause, he's going to return back to here and do damage to the enemies that he went through to go there. That damage goes through stamina, as you noticed. It didn't deplete it, but it did do damage, even though they had stamina, so it's useful. It also, this little yellow meter here, shows how long they're going to be stunned, which is important because, as you've noticed, it takes time for them to be able to attack again after they've already attacked once. Buff him. Wait for it, wait for it. And backstabbing actually renews the... that's the wrong number of attacks there. Actually renews the stun meter, which is important. But the game never tells you about backstabbing at all. It never mentions it as a mechanic whatsoever, and that's a little unfortunate because it's hugely important, especially later on in the game when things get particularly difficult. But still, now you know. And also, as you can see, you have a time limit in the battles. When the time runs out, the enemies will begin to run away, so you don't actually have to kill every enemy in the battle, but if you are able to kill all of them before the time runs out, or before they all run away, you get a bonus of like 25 gold at the end of it, which is very useful. I might be able to do here? I don't know. Nah, nope, not quite. Screwed it up. That's okay. Still got some gold from killing them. And we didn't get hurt. If an enemy reaches you before you're able to actually hit them away, which is why sometimes attacking them, even though it's not the perfect amount of hits, just to get them away from you is important, it's necessary sometimes to do that. But if they reach you, they will deplete your stamina. And some enemies can even hit you more than once, which means if you only have one stamina, they'll start hitting your health immediately. And these are important. Unlike the enemies, you do not regenerate stamina, and this is one of the things that makes the games really hard. You don't regen stamina like they do, and that's a problem. Once your stamina is gone, it is gone, until you find one of these stamina camps, where you can rest up and regen all of it. There's usually only like one on every level, and as you can see, if it was one of these, I may not have even found it. I just got kind of lucky. I don't need it right now, but it's there. Which means that if you do actually take a hit in a battle, you are at a serious disadvantage in every future battle until you can find one of those. Because if that character gets hit again, it's likely they'll take damage to their health. And you don't have a lot of health compared to how much damage enemies can actually do. And if even one of your characters goes down, you lose immediately. There are no revives or anything like that. If one of your character's health gets reduced to 0, the run is over, and you have got to start a new game. Let's see. Increased critical hit chance, 15% damage for next spell. Well, I think I'm going to actually give that to probably the... well, yeah, we'll give it to... he needs more health anyway. Makes sense. There are a ton of spells and items, though, which I like. Now, in this case, I'm just going to go this way. You also have these candles I mentioned. If you go backwards to an area that you've already been to, it takes a candle in order to actually do that. If you don't have any candles, you will lose the game. Seriously. You die. Like, immediately. You just straight up die. No chance to get out of it. Which is a little rough, but that's how it works. And you've got no choice sometimes but to just deal with it. Oh yeah, I forgot that happens. Oh yeah, crap. This isn't good. Not good at all. Sometimes the number of hits you gotta use is just to get them away. There we go. And if they are stunned and you contact them, you won't take damage, you just knock them away, which is good. Like I said, stunning is very important. You need to make sure you get the correct number of hits on the enemies at all times, if you can manage it. Sometimes if they're so close that you're afraid it's not going to matter or anything, then, you know, just smack them around a bit to get them away from you. Otherwise, definitely calculate the correct number of hits. There we go. Get this guy up here. So, overall, the actual combat system itself is really enjoyable. It's pretty hectic, especially in boss fights where things can get absurdly hectic really fast, and you can have just a ridiculous number of enemies on screen at any given time, and it gets very worrying very quickly. The bosses are challenging, to say the least. But it's also very satisfying. Because of the way the mechanics work, it often means that you have to complete pretty much every battle you come across perfectly. You have to perfect every battle, basically. Come on. Come on, there we go. Yeah, and if you don't complete a battle perfectly, you'll be at... either you'll just die immediately, or you'll be at a severe disadvantage for every future battle because of that lack of stamina regen until you find a camp, if you find a camp. So that kind of makes it to where you've really got to make sure you get it right. And I have to admit that even though that of course does raise the difficulty significantly, there's a lot of satisfaction in going through a level and not getting hit a single time, because the mechanics of the game basically dictate that that's the way you need to play in order to be successful. And of course this is really satisfying too.
Double kill.
But as it turns out, I think what really kind of puts the, I guess the icing on the cake of the combat system is how much hidden nuance there is in certain things. Like, all the spell interactions you can get with like water and lightning and fire and stuff like that, there's quite a lot here. There we go. New enemy type! Also, I haven't mentioned these orbs. As you kill enemies, you'll get souls, and these orbs will fill up, because the entire point of the game is that you are, you're escorting these not-so-happy-bad princesses to university. That's literally the point of the game. You're not saving the world, you're just escorting these people to school. And as you kill enemies, these orbs will fill up, and you can click on them once they're full to get a free spell cast. The free spell cast is important. Not only does casting a spell through this not put it on cooldown, but you can also cast a spell with this that is currently on cooldown. So it's kind of a big deal. An item gambler. That would be nice. I think I only have enough gold for one try at the item gambler if I do it, and I would have to use my only candle to go back and fight the boss, but I'm gonna try it just because I'm recording and high risk, high reward, right? Alright, let's do it. I've never even got... oh, it's only 40 gold for one, okay. The spell gambler's 110 for one, so I kind of figured that maybe, you know. Alright, I have no idea what that item does, so I don't know who I want to choose to get it. So let's just go for the only person that doesn't have an item yet. Nope. It was down there. Alright, another 2. You can't really follow it, obviously, it's way too fast, so you just gotta guess. Let's try one more time. I got the original one. It is Vampire's Necklace. Faster spell recharge, and... ooh, a chance to heal 1 stamina, but it's only a 1% chance. That tells you how valuable stamina is in this game. But I think on a 3-hit rogue, that item makes the most sense. Okay. So, we're gonna use our candle to go back. We are all at full stamina, mostly full health. It does regen, luckily. Your health does. Your stamina doesn't, but your health does. And now let's fight the boss. There are, I think, 2 bosses that you can find on the first level, and I get... okay, the one that I personally find easier. Here we go. Boss time. This boss will spawn a nigh-on infinite wave of skeletons. Can I buff anyone with this? I can. That will stun them. We'll do this, and smack, smack. There we go. Already taken off a bunch of health because of that. Let's do that as well, and start bashing people around. Because I don't really need to start... you don't need to kill the other skeletons as much as you need to just keep them back for a while. I'll start sending this out. Go! Yeah! And so boss fights are interesting in this game. Every time you, well, there are story bosses. And the story bosses are actually, you only fight them once. Well, if you beat them, you only beat them once, I should say. And after that, you will unlock a bunch of new stuff, like a bunch of new enemy types to fight, which does make the game harder, of course. You will also unlock a pair of new levels, a pretty significant variety of other things, some, you know, like some spells and items and stuff like that, as well as a new character for the first time you do it. Yeah, and that is hugely satisfying, by the way. And some of the story bosses, which are always these like ghost pirate fellows, are definitely challenging. For sure. Okay. There we go. As you can see in boss fights, actually making sure that your hit numbers actually match the stamina of the boss is pretty much omni-important. You have to do it, or you will not be successful in damaging the boss pretty much at all. Oh god. And as you can also see, it quickly gets very, very hectic. Okay, come on, this should do it. Yes! And it's still really awesome when you pull it off. And that's level 1. Sometimes you'll want to take a really long path to get to as many crossroads as possible, maybe get a bunch of items and spells, depending on how many keys for locked chests and how much gold you have and what kind of crossroads you have unlocked and things like that. Sometimes you may want to try and get to the boss really quickly because you're afraid of losing too much stamina and stuff like that. It all depends on how your run is going and what kind of characters you're going with, and it's different every time. But now for some of the complaints that I have about the game. I do think it's a really good game, but it does have a couple of strange problems for me. Alright, so I need a lightning spell for that. I'm gonna ignore the elemental spell vendor, I think. You start with all of these, and these are very important. Taking advantage of these bonuses is a huge deal. Every character has a different set of them, and they're quite strong. These like various synergies, essentially. The issue is, you start with so few spells unlocked that it is really difficult to actually take advantage of any of them, really? Which is kind of a big deal, because with a game that's this challenging, I got it, it makes you feel like you're missing something. Because one of the kind of major mechanics of the game that's meant to, you know, help you go through the game easier, when the difficulty is so high, you want to be able to do everything you can to make it easier on yourself. But one of the major mechanics is actually nigh on impossible to properly take advantage of until you've done, you know, a lot of runs through the game. Simply because of the sheer number of unlocks. And I don't have a problem with the unlocks per se, it's more of a problem with the amount that you start with. As you can, I mean, you saw just the absurd number of spells that you can get in this game, which is awesome. But you start with a very, very small number of those actually unlocked. Yeah. Which means that basically taking advantage of any of those synergies is just not gonna happen at first. You would have had to have like known in advance almost what you're going to get. And that just doesn't happen, really. I need to keep him, actually. I mean, you would have, like, for instance, the third spell here needs to be a buff. How many buffs do you actually start with? Not a lot. But to even get to the point where you would know, like, how many spells you're going to run across, and which of those are going to end up being buffs, and which other characters you'll need to put the spells that aren't buffs on to end up with the next spell you find being the buff to actually put here. So maybe the first spell you come across you'll want to put here, and the second spell you'll come across you'll want to put here, and then the third spell, well, that's a buff, so you'll put it here. And maybe that's the only one you'll find that run, so if you messed it up and didn't put a spell here, then you won't have built up to the point where you can put that one here. And the problem is that you start with so few of them unlocked that the situations that you'll come across to actually take advantage of that mechanic are, like, just so few and far between that it almost won't ever happen at first. You'll have to play through like a dozen plus runs to unlock enough spells to actually make any of those work, really. Which is kind of unfortunate, because again, the game is really hard, and I don't have a problem with that. It's just that in a game that bills itself as being very difficult, you want as much of an advantage as you can get for yourself. And the game presents you with, a clear mechanic to do that, and then doesn't really give you the means to take advantage of it for a long time. Which makes you feel like you're missing something. Okay. Right there. Although that is really cool. Okay, that sucks. He just took like half of his health and damage, her health and damage, actually even more than that, in a single hit. Okay. The game does get more and more difficult as you go, of course, but it gets more and more difficult very quickly, I should say. Here we go. And we're gonna double strike ourselves. But still, that problem being said, I still think it's a very good game. I just think that, like I said, you really could start with a couple more things unlocked. It wouldn't hurt the game in any way because of the sheer number of things that you have anyway to unlock. It wouldn't harm the game to just start you off with a couple more of them. And also, maybe a couple of things could be better explained. Like, it's not obvious for a while how many of those bonuses, or if any of those bonuses actually affect all spells, or just the spells that are in the slot. And of course, as I mentioned, they only affect the spell that's in the slot. It doesn't tell you that, though. So yeah, anyway, I still think it's a really, really solid game, with a huge amount of replayability, but a very high learning curve. The game has an interesting kind of paradox in that it gets more difficult the longer you play, because you will unlock more and more enemy types that will come across, that you will come across, and that are quite difficult. But as you're doing that, you'll also have more characters and more spells at your disposal, so even though the game is technically getting more difficult, it's also, by the time that you'll have all that, you'll have learned the mechanics better, and you'll also have a lot more tools at your disposal to help yourself out to deal with those new threats. So it's not really just a straight up more difficult as much as it's, I would say, more complex. Either way, there's an absurd amount of replayability here, and if you want to know the price, the game is $20, which isn't bad at all in my opinion. It's actually a pretty fair price for the amount of content that's on offer, like 300 plus spells, 200 plus items, a very large amount of levels, and a good number of boss fights and things for you to enjoy. And I think if you like the Rogue-lite formula with a bit of a kind of strategy twist, enjoy it you will, and I would recommend it. By the way, if you didn't know, this game is made by Frozenbyte, the guys that did Trine. So, the very, very cool art style and interesting dialogue and stuff like that. Are they writing it? What in the world is going on there? If the pretty awesome art style and often quite funny and snippy dialogue didn't give it away, then they're not writing each other, as I thought. They're just... I was kind of wondering if my perception was off there. Then that should tell you. Anyway, I would recommend the game. It's got its problems, but I think that if you give it a shot and work through it, for at least get past the first pirate boss and unlock your first character, the game starts to shine as you've gotten enough things unlocked here. And this is how you unlock the things, by the way. And as you do this more and more, the game gets more and more complex and more satisfying to play as a result. And you'll start finding this stuff, and every run will get even better. So, yeah, that has been Heroes. It's actually pretty interesting, and I would recommend that you give it a shot if this is your kind of thing. Again, $20 on Steam, not bad. The link is in the description below if you want to check it out. And thanks very much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.